Hello, everyone. My name is Larry Drummond. I'm the Executive Director of the IPMI, and it is my extreme pleasure to welcome you to our first global webinar, COVID-19 Challenges and Solutions. One of IPMI's founding principles is the distribution of knowledge and experience to our members. As we have seen in the past year, our focus is to provide the landscape for you to connect, learn, and build relationships. Today, our focus is for you to learn, but also to connect, as members from around the world are on this webinar. We are living through unprecedented times due to the global pandemic, COVID-19. It has created unbelievable challenges in our personal and professional lives. We have created a panel here today that represents many segments of the precious metal industry, as well as spanning the globe in many geographic locations. We also have a mix of small, medium, and large companies. My one request to all of you is to let today's webinar be the start of the process. You will learn a great deal from our panel, take those learnings, and begin to communicate with each other. I strongly believe in the concept of a rising tide. The whole industry will benefit if we pass these learnings on to each other and build on them. We all will be better off in the process and build relationships with each other that will last a lifetime. Before I introduce our panel, I need to take care of some business, and that is to just remind everyone of our antitrust policy. Excuse me if I read this, okay? So our General Counsel, Steve Garner, has asked me to remind all participants that the IPMI has an antitrust policy that we must strictly adhere to in all meetings, presentations, and discussions. While we usually pass out this policy in live meetings, we have to go to a different methodology today, so I'm reminding you of that, and you can find our policy on www.ipmi.org. During our panel discussion today, we would like to stress that certain topics are off limits. These include any discussions on pricing, price changes, price differentials, profit margins, discounts, production supply, production capacity, inventories, sales, marketing matters relating to specific suppliers or customers. And Steve will be monitoring the webinar just to make sure that no one inadvertently raises any of these prohibited topics. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. We're having one slight technical difficulty, but we have Raphael Armbruster, who is the Senior Vice President of EH&S and Quality Management for Heraeus. Larry Baden, the Site Manager for Johnson Matthey at West Deptford, New Jersey. Chris Jones, President of Gannon & Scott. Alexi Kornienko, Head of Engineering at Kravismet from Russia. John Potts, Managing Director of Fidelitrade. And now I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Brad Cook, who is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Sabin Metals Corporation. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Larry. Welcome, everybody. We appreciate you being with us this morning. I hope that you and yours are safe and healthy. As everybody knows who's listening to this, I'm sure the precious metals industry has been through some crazy rides in the last few decades. But this one we are navigating now is some unexplored territory. The Corona coaster has so far given us metals price volatility, lease rate insanity, domestic and international travel restrictions, shipping rates are spiked and up and down availability, even a lockdown of the PGM coming out of South Africa. This morning, we're going to try to cover these topics, but maybe a few more. And I have a very esteemed panel with me today. I want to allow each of these gentlemen a moment to briefly introduce themselves and their companies. Why don't we start with you, Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Brad, and thanks for having me. I'm the president of Gannon & Scott. and I'm also a past president of IPMI. Gannon & Scott is a North American-based secondary refinery. We were headquartered and founded in Rhode Island, and which was a kind of right in the middle of one of the initial hotspots in the middle of between Boston and New York. And then we have a second plant in Phoenix, Arizona. To give you a sense for scale, we're just over 60 employees. We started business about 100 years ago, and we haven't had to lay off any employees. Business is not as brisk as it was prior to COVID-19, but we've been able to maintain a modest backlog to maintain production.
Okay, thank you very much. Larry Baden is joining us on audio. His camera's on the fricks. Larry, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation. As the site manager of Johnson Matthey's refinery and chemical products site manager, it's been a pleasure to join this company in November, but certainly a challenge to battle through the last few months. Glad to report our site, about 360 employees, maintains actually a fairly robust busy schedule supporting pharmaceutical and some other critical businesses. We do have about 120 of our employees working from home, which, as everyone's also gone through, been a big transition. But the union operators that are here, as well as the rest of the operations staff that have stayed on site, have just stepped up to an amazing challenge and adapted to a new way of living and a new way of surviving. But our throughput through March and April have been a real testimony to our workforce, the pride, and Johnson Matthey's corporate support through it all. So glad to be able to share some of our learnings that we've had here in the last months, as well as that we've garnered from our other facilities from around the globe. So I look forward to continuing my time here at Johnson Matthey and getting more involved in IPMI in the months to come.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you very much. I guess we're having some technical difficulties getting Rafael connected. So Alexi, would you like to jump in here and introduce yourself, please?
Sure, Brad, thanks. So thanks for having me. I'm Alexi Kornienko, head of engineering. I've been in CrossFit Med for 15 years so far, managing different projects and positions. So for the CrossFit Med itself, for those who is not yet familiar with the company, this is a precious metal refinery based in Russia. We're doing refining at industrial scale of all 8 precious metals. From secondary mineral material. We also do manufacture industrial appliances for nitric acid production for glass industry, and we do jewelry. So where we are currently with this COVID situation. So it took us in the end of March 2020, when lots of businesses and activities in Russia were put on hold due to the implemented quarantine measures from the government. Except the government made exceptions for some types of productions. Those are like medical organizations, grocery and drugstores, emergency services, and continuous productions. So luckily, CrossFit Med were among those exceptions, and refining operations were considered to be continuous productions, and that we cannot stop and continue our operations, as well as our industrial appliances divisions that manufactures products that afterwards used in industries such as pharmaceuticals. So our clients who has a demand for our products supported us with the operations going on. So currently we are working at a regular pace. Total number of employees is around 2K people. 85% is working. 40% out of this are operating from the home office. This is mostly our office staff. So we succeeded to digitalize most of our operational and development activities. Our corporate university is operating online, providing almost 1,000 training per person on a daily basis. So this is so far what we have.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. John, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Potts. I'm the managing director of Fidelitrade Delaware Depository, and we are a small business located in Wilmington, Delaware, in which we do bullion trading, and we operate a exchange-approved precious metals depository, exchange-approved for the CME and ICE exchanges. I'm president of the IPMI and the Silver User Association, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John. Just quickly, myself, Brad Cook with Sabin Metal. I've been VP of Sales and Marketing since 2015. I joined in 2012 to the Sabin organization. And I think John is a little modest. He didn't mention that he is also a past president of IPMI, and as well as Larry Drummond and myself and Chris. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. I do want to remind the viewers that your platform should allow you to submit a question to us. It'll pop up for us to view, and we'll be selecting some questions later on to try to answer from the panel. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with the most important resource and aspect of all of this to everybody, and that's our colleagues and our coworkers and their safety and their health and that of them and their families. I'm gonna go back to you, John. As a trust company, a vault, a distribution center, you're physically handling the bullion that goes through your facility, and it'd be interesting to know what you've done in terms of safety and social distancing in that regard. How do you get that done operationally and still maintain the safety?
Yeah, so our challenge has been during this period is that our volumes have gone up fourfold as the demand for bullion has gone up, but our resources and capabilities have become restricted. So as a trust company, we're considered an essential business and remain open. We handle physical bullion. We work in close quarters in the vaults. And we have a critical need for internal controls, and that includes dual control, which unfortunately requires people to come closer together. So fortunately, we've had a business continuity plan in place for quite some time, and part of that has been a pandemic preparedness plan in which up to now we've only had to do tabletop exercises. And I got to say, having that in place was really, really, really helpful. Now we've learned some things and we've added to that plan so far, but it really gave us a good jump start on kicking all of this off. And I recommend to everybody, even as a couple of years ago, who would have thought this would have happened? But we put it in place. We did tabletop exercises, and it's really, really helped us out. So in dealing with this, the first thing we did was we took some of our high-risk employees and put them on paid leave. There's a few employees that we know have specific health issues and were at high risk, so we wanted just to protect them first. And secondly, we initiated a robust employee communication, training, and update process in which on a nearly every other day, we're sending some communication out to our employees, updating them on federal, state, local developments, as well as developments within the company and steps that we're taking. We've canceled all travel. We've canceled all visitors. We had in place hand sanitizing stations throughout our buildings. We operate 4 buildings in Delaware and 1 in California. And we've added additional hand sanitizing stations. So the next thing we did is we implemented a disinfecting routine. Now we increased our janitorial frequency and have it focusing on disinfecting and sanitizing areas. And we implemented an individual at the individual employee level, a process in which every day, every employee, we provide them the supplies to do it, wipe down their work area, wipe down their keyboards, their mice, their phones, their desks, doorknobs, things like that. And so every employee has a responsibility for their specific work area. We've restructured some of our workflows. We do have a disaster recovery site. We have 4 buildings. So the first thing we did was we analyzed and determined who could work from home, which included IT folks, legal, cash management, trading, and then some customer service and some management. So we have them working from home. That freed up a lot more space in our buildings, which allowed us to spread our employees out more. They can occupy some of the vacated spaces, use our disaster recovery site, and splitting our vault operations into 2 buildings. So if one becomes infected and needs a deep cleaning, if you will, the other one can continue to operate. We also have a biohazard company on retainer. So if we do have find that we have somebody with an infection, fortunately we haven't had anybody yet, they could come in on a 4-hour window and start sanitizing the business, so we'd only be shut down for a short time.
Good stuff.
And then, but where we still feel like we're at risk, is the greatest risk at least, is in our vault areas. They're small, high density areas. We have dual control. We're handling physical products. So there we're requiring the wearing of face masks. We've provided gloves, more frequent hand washing and breaks to do those sort of things. So those are some of the things that we've put in place to deal with this.
Very good. Thank you. I think you brought up something really important, and that is, not only what are we doing, but what are we learning from what's happened to us in these last few months and what's happening now, and how is that changing our outlook for future preparedness and the ongoing. I'm going to put a pin in that because we will come back to that, John. Thank you for that very much. Mm-hmm. It sounds similar to what some of the things we're doing at Sabin. We broke shifts into completely different setups, 4 days on, 4 days off, where each employee is only exposed to a half a dozen or at the most 10 different other people instead of the whole plant full of people on their shift time. So it's rotating on a 24/7 schedule to keep up with the workload and all of the disinfecting sides of things. I think most of us are doing that. The administrative people working from home who can. So it sounds very similar. Chris, did you want to jump in here with a comment?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about our mitigation steps.
Please.
We did our mitigation in phases, if you will. Initially following the CDC guidance, and then adding structure to areas where we saw that people were struggling to maintain social distancing. For the most part, the work areas in our physical plants are fairly low density. So I can definitely appreciate what struggles you would have in a vaulting environment. So what we found was that more of the natural gathering areas was where we had to focus more of our reinforcement efforts. So break rooms, lunch rooms, locker rooms. For people that weren't working at home that still were coming in and had desks, we simply asked them to take breaks and lunch from there. For others, we staggered breaks and reporting and departure times. The one thing that did help was we removed all but one chair from each of the break room tables, and it just worked as a constant reminder, not to sort of fall into the normal routines. Another resource that we had gleaned some very, very helpful tips from early on was the Rhode Island Manufacturing Association had put out a safe work guidebook for the pandemic. And while I imagine other manufacturing trade associations did similar, we found this one to be particularly helpful. It's available on their website if you wanted to check it out. It's the Rhode Island Manufacturers Association. In terms of cases, thankfully we've not had any positive cases. We did, however, have one employee at the time that we understood to have been in close contact with a relative that tested positive. We had that employee stay out and contact a doctor about getting tested. And we found this out on a Friday. So over the weekend, we started to react to it. And just to be on the safe side, we opted to close the plant. This was the one in Rhode Island. We brought in a crew to do a deep clean and sanitize the facility. Turned out the closure lasted 3 days for us. The employee actually tested negative, and we later learned that the family member that was initially reported to us as being positive had actually only been told by their employer that one of their coworkers had tested positive. So in hindsight, this may have been an overreaction, but I'm actually quite proud of the way our leadership had, acted out of an abundance of caution.
Yeah.
And there actually turned out to be a hidden benefit. It gave everyone in our organization a dose of just how seriously we all need to take this. Because while Rhode Island, like right now, that facility, there's now an order that everybody has to wear masks. But in our Arizona operations, where we have had, relatively speaking, low case count and low fatality rate, but that number is starting to climb because of the high density of elder care facilities that we have, and we certainly have some issues on the Native American reservations. They've been hit particularly hard, but there's an attitude that it's happening out in New York, and it's happening on the West Coast. So the folks in Arizona, when they hear that headquarters is closing because of this, for at the time when we did it, we weren't sure how long it was going to be. We were trying to recover as quickly as we could, and because we have customer deadlines and certainly many legal obligations to consider. So fortunately, it was short-lived, but it was definitely a good wake-up call for us.
Yeah, as you say, to err on the side of caution. Yeah, very good. Yeah, Alexi, I think you wanted to make a comment before I ask my next part of the question.
Yeah, I would just add a few comments. We have the like measures taken at the factory, as you do, Brad, have, and Chris and John mentioned. Just if you what we also have, due to the a big number of employees at the factory, we organized a safe transportation. So we rented buses to transfer our employees from their homes to their workplaces safely at a safe social distancing within the buses. So we also try to, we recommended our elderly people who are over 65 years to stay home, provided them with the paid leave. And also doing lots of sanitizing, temperature measurements on the site. I guess this is so far.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, I wanted to allow Larry Baden to jump in here because, as we've all commented, there's a lot of operational functions that require more than one person here. We can get the appropriate PPE and we can get the social distancing working. But as many of us are aware, Johnson Matthey has facilities in China. So I'm curious to know how the feedback and guidance from your employees and facilities experience in China helped you shape or update your continuity plan, your contingency plan for the rest of the globe, or specifically in North America as well, to kind of compare to these other responses?
Yeah, Brad, we actually had the fortune of having one of our Chinese colleagues actually working in the West Deptford plant up until just before the year end, up until December. So there was a lot of personal attachments and a lot of, obviously friendships developed. That gentleman returned to China, really walking into as the epidemic expanded there. So, we all had that, direct dialogue with him, email, voicemails, voice calls, and we're able to garnish from him, not just personally how he's doing and the team is doing, but what they were doing. And it forced us to, things, business continuity, business sustainability, grabbing that off, blowing the dust off of that package and studying it and just seeing what's pertinent. What do we need to do? How are they handling it? Even things we started reacting, sending them PPE supplies, things that were becoming in short supply there. And, so that drove us locally to just in case. I can't say it. In January, were we that fearful of it becoming as significant of an event as it has been here, especially in the Northeast? But we did. We were proactive, and the N95 mask and sanitizers and cleaning supplies and Tyvek suits, anything we could think we could get, whether we've had it and it wasn't going to go bad on the shelf, or we could possibly have to share it elsewhere through the globe. So we did get a little running start. Maybe ahead of others, perhaps not, but at least from our point of view, I believe we started looking at this, thinking about it, planning for it ahead of the local and state and federal and even CDC. I mean, it was early March in New York City, and they were like, it's okay, you go out to restaurants, but we were well ahead of that, weeks ahead of that here. Social distancing. We were, I think Chris Jones mentioned, isolating some of the more at-risk employees, having them work at home, whether we had some pregnant employees or elder employees. We opened it up to people who just had concerns, whether they were young and healthy but lived with elderly parents that had some health issues. So we were very flexible, very tolerant, and gave those people the options. And it grew some, real positive feedback from the employees that were here, that people weren't like, hey, why am I still here? It's, hey, that's nice that we're able to do that. Yeah. And we built off of that. And, the team here adapted, stressed, and struggled with it. And we have actually had 5 employees test positive. 2 of them were actually part of the work from home team. So obviously they didn't pose a risk to additional transmissions here. When the first one popped up, the emotions ran high, and we were ready for it. I had talked to my colleagues in China and said, how did you talk to the people? How did they react? I was a little bit, ready for it, but it was still a lot of emotions, but just captured that, learned from it, expanded some cleaning, disinfecting. We just had to keep gaining the confidence in the people that we were asking to come to the plant every day, that we were doing the right thing, and we were willing to be flexible and take the brought third party in disinfecting, some electrostatic disinfecting that seemed to be very very effective. It's been when employee number 2 came, we were even that much more ready, and the third one came, it was kind of a non-event. People like, okay, and they knew where it was and who was impacted and how we're handling it. So we've matured very quickly through a pretty crazy time. But I think having that advanced learning, advanced thinking, advanced planning back into as early as January was very instrumental here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as it turns out, those black swans and 100-year floods actually do occur. And dusting that plan off, as you put it, is I think drives home for a lot of us the reality of it. But there's nothing like hearing from the front lines. Your company had the, I guess you could call it a benefit, but at least had the opportunity to capitalize upon the experience of your colleagues in Asia. And I think we're all doing that from one another right now by sharing what we can herein.
Brad, it's Larry. Can I just ask a follow-up question to Larry or anyone on the panel? How have you handled, from a communication point, the issue of, you're all been deemed, essential businesses, yet from a family point of view, most of your family, especially with little ones, have been sequestered at home. So how have you dealt with the issue where, your employees are going to work every day? Obviously, you're taking all kinds of precautions, but they're exposed, and then coming back home to the family who has been sequestered. Has there been any kind of special communication or special precautions taken in that regard?
I could speak personally, Larry. Again, this is Larry Baden from Johnson Matthey. I'm going home to an elementary school teacher that's teaching from home, and was very concerned about me bringing, being contaminated, being at risk, and bringing it home. I had deal with that on a personal level, and some of those conversations. There was others in the plant having it. We helped them. We put up videos on our board. Some of our sales teams developed a video of what critical businesses we were continuing to support, whether it's pharmacology, oncology, critical agricultural. We try to just build up that sense of importance and pride that we were truly we needed people to come to work and keep the business viable, not just for Johnson Matthey's revenue, but for critical customers and ultimately the end customers. So we tried to build on that and stress on it. Of course there was some pushback, some questioning, but again, as we shared more information, talked about it, we have a great labor climate with our United Steelworkers, and their president is he's been sitting in there was daily meetings. Now we've gone to 3 times a week. He participates in it. We've got finance, sales, commercial, supply chain, obviously ops, engineering, safety, environmental, OC health, and the union is, one of the maybe 25 people attending. So he's been, and his leadership team have been key to going out, and they're hearing the same message I'm telling them. They're going out and confirming it. It's just, that communication, that we're all in this together. We're all facing those same personal stresses. My wife won't let me in the house until I'll say disrobe and head in, and we kind of laugh at it. I see Brad smiling on that comment, but that's the reality. You have to adapt and adjust and make it work. But I've come in here 95% of the days myself, and as a leader, it was hard for me to expect a few hundred others to come in if I wasn't here. So again, lead by example. I think coming in here every day has been well received and appreciated. Maybe here, maybe not so much at home, but again, you have to find that balance. And I think it was really critical to be present and take those questions, issues, challenges head on immediately. Not, let me send you an email. I needed to be here and talk to people. Set up 3 or 4 people in a large room, and you're social distancing, but at least you're directing it face to face and immediately.
Yeah, walking the walk. Yeah. Has any of your companies implemented a testing protocol?
This is John. We have not yet. But we do have, and we're looking at protocols for temperature testing. I know that's only one of the symptoms, but it's something that's available to us. We're looking at it, not having only having a couple of people. Fortunately, one of our employees, the one that heads up security and safety, happens to be a fireman as well. And so he's trained in these things. But getting through some of the difficulties of how do you actually monitor and test coming into multiple buildings throughout the day without having people that are constantly exposed to it is proving to be easier said than done. But we're looking at thermal temperature testing.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. So far, the only thing that we've done is anybody that was suspect positive, we've asked them to contact their doctor to try to arrange testing. And there's been I would say there's been a mix. We've had some doctors that have just said, go ahead, go to one of the mobile testing sites, and they authorize it. Others have been, well, you're not really experiencing any symptoms, so we don't really think it's necessary. But if you don't have any symptoms, you're cleared to report back to work. It's not the most comforting, but it just kind of demonstrates that there's quite a varied approach to testing.
Yeah. And, as Matt commented, in some parts of the country, the tests are abundant and available. And in other parts, not so much. They're being restricted, as you say, either by the need and the show of symptoms or the risk factors. I know the medical professionals and those frontline police officers, firemen and EMTs are taking the priority on that in some part of the country still. But let's move on. We've got another question about security in terms of communication. We've all commented that we have a portion of our workforce working from home. Home offices are often, as we are right now, using some sort of wireless device online, streaming video perhaps. And there's a lot of secure conversations that take place. There's a lot of proprietary information being shared out there. Can anyone comment on what their company's approach has been to online security and communications?
I can start off with what we've sort of done and experienced with this. Fortunately for us, communications has not been a huge problem, mainly because part of, I guess, our business continuity plan, we had already been maintaining a VPN with a fairly robust firewall and login credentials for remote access to the core operating systems. Load balancing early on was a bit of an initial constraint as we were setting up some additional laptops for our the tower users in the office to be able to work from home. Communicating with our financial service providers through web portals has all worked well. We've experienced no disruptions to executing transactions, to our metal line, whether it's trading or hedging. On the treasury side, Bank of America and their Cash Pro system has been great and functioned very, very well for us. I have to say, it also doesn't hurt that we absolutely have the best relationship manager in all of B of A assigned to our account. So and I say that somewhat jokingly because I think she's on this
probably
the audience. So but it is true. Managing payables and payroll and ACA, also no big problem doing it remotely. A lot of businesses transacted already now through portals. The only physical thing that we needed somebody at the office for is for the occasional check that you have to cut. From a security standpoint, we have a team of network and IT professionals that are our employees, and they monitor the traffic well, and we do a lot of training to make sure that people aren't clicking on spam emails or any of the targeted phishing attacks. And this came out in an IPMI Security Council meeting. There was one of our insurance members had oh gosh, who was it? He's on the board as well. Sorry, his name escapes me, but he turned.
Simon Codrington.
Yes, thank you, Larry. That's it. Yeah, Simon had mentioned that they had very, very good success with a social engineering program that was called Know Before, and we've been using that for a couple of years, and it's really brought down, the accidental, clicking on things that you shouldn't do. And I would definitely recommend it. It was a big help for our internet security.
Very good. I know there's been some very informative and interesting presentations in past conferences that on the cybersecurity issue, getting worse all the time. So it's something that every company is already thinking about. Just some different approaches right now with so many people working from home. Can we touch on? We had a question about business interruption insurance, and if we have a specialist who's able to comment on that with us right now, I'm hoping one of you guys can jump in here. But the question or comment does say that it's very, very hard to obtain right now. What has been anyone's experience with business interruption insurance?
We haven't had a need for it.
Okay, I'm sorry. We'll have to move on from that. Let's talk about logistics and supply chain management for a minute here. As we said, the shipping rates and availability issues have affected everybody, as well as the domestic and international travel restrictions. I know my salespeople and I have been grounded, so to speak, for a couple of months now. The flight availability has been completely reduced internationally and domestically around the world. How are these challenges affecting you guys and your companies, and what can you give us for an outlook on that?
Brad, it's Larry Bowden from Johnson Matthey.
Sure, Larry.
Yeah, we do move a lot of material to the UK, and we could do that any day of the week, any hour of the day. That's changed. I mean, we're generally seeing things limited to Tuesdays, Thursdays, so we've got to plan ahead a little bit more. We're trying to plan that into our production schedule. Material may need to be produced a little sooner to meet those dates. And if we can't do that, it's just communicating the impact. And customers have been understanding of the situation, and we're working with our commercial team as well as just our internal, from our U.S. site to our U.K. site, moving material. So it's hasn't. I think it was looking more grim initially, but it has settled into a reasonably stable, but not as flexible as it had been in the past, for sure.
All right. Let me share our company's experience on logistics in COVID times. So we definitely have faced reduced availability of flights, both within the country and on international destinations. Domestically, we just had to wait for the date of flight availability. This is very sad, but just losing sometimes time. For international, that's a bit more complicated. We have a few options that is helping us. The first one is catching cargo flights, DHL, Lufthansa Cargo, which is apparently more expensive than passenger flights. The other one is catching any available flights to any destinations, just basically doing transiting instead of doing direct flights, which is also more expensive in our case. And the last thing that was helping us is Brinks of Russia. The guys were arranging charter flights to London and Zurich. It was like once in a week and twice in a week for all commercial banks in Russia willing to export gold and silver, as well as for any other market participants. And this option is also more expensive. So overall, we are managing to fulfill our contractual obligations so far for product delivery or material sourcing, but sometimes at a higher logistics costs. Also, there are issues in terms of the people transportation. We have put on hold our servicing activities, where we require our personnel to visit sites for plant commissioning and supervising installment, for example, of catalytic gases, or cleaning jobs to be done at the nitric acid plants. So we hope to relaunch those activities then the travel restrictions are lifted. But in the meantime, we are upgrading our online services for customers to be able to source those services online without our employees being present at the site. But this is just a near future. We're still working on it. On the side of the equipment purchase, so prior to the COVID times, we have ordered a manufacturing of fuel furnaces, and it took us just around the April when we need to do a factory acceptance test, an FAT, just to see how the furnace is operational and then to collect it. And we practically were not able to do it. Our engineers were not able to travel outside the country, and the country of destination was just completely closed the borders. So we did that FAT test just through the video conference. That was the first time in our company's history doing FAT by video conference. And we managed it quite well. I guess could be a nice experience to share with everyone.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Alexi. Anyone else have a comment on that? Okay. Obviously, there's a lot of differences around the world. We're a large international organization. Our membership is spread around the globe. And in those different regions and countries, there are different levels of restriction, different approaches to the COVID virus problem. I guess and I'm going to go back to you at first here, Alexi. What about the some other government support? Is there anything else that you wanted to add in that regard, or anything in terms of what your country, the restrictions that are in place right now from this point forward?
Yeah, we just had a very interesting case of cooperation between regional government, industry association, and business itself. This is the case with the Russian Association for Development of Science Parks in Russia. The association basically provides a dialogue between business community and federal and regional authorities just to develop the scientific potential of Russia. And as some of you may know, CrossFitMed has the R&D park on its site, was launched 2 years ago. And the R&D park is a member of this association and managing several startups and innovative companies in its premises. So it's not our core business, but this is something we trust, and we put much effort into it. So currently in this COVID situation, most of the businesses were put on hold. So startups and small innovative companies just are not able to sell its product, not able to produce its product, consequently not being able to pay the rent to science parks. And that loss of income from with science parks is forcing them basically to close. So this very association that I manage, they are managing to identify those issues and transfer them to regional authorities, proposing a set of mitigation actions, how just to support science parks in Russia, because those are like developing and vulnerable organizations. And surprisingly, our R&D park was asked from regional authorities, like, guys, what are your current issues? What are your experiences? Do you need any support? So we was very surprised, like, wow. So our positive learning here was how all this cooperation between industry association and regional authorities might work in this critical situation for developing business was quite surprising and helping.
Good stuff. I guess I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but to touch on that question, or maybe rephrase it a little bit better, we are seeing that some local provinces and states, or even entire countries, are beginning to open back up. They're relaxing and eliminating the restrictions, or even completely opening up to get the economy flowing again. Can anybody comment on their future outlook? Not trying to ask you to look into the crystal ball, but simply your organization's concept on what recovery is going to look like.
Yeah, I can add something. We're waiting for the governor of Rhode Island to make an announcement today that there's speculation that she may start to ease restrictions, and some businesses may start to open back up again. We were, in both Arizona and Rhode Island, we were considered essential businesses, so it hasn't affected us, but we still have employees that are working from home. So, will some of that easing, will that mean that some people can start to come back to work? We just don't know. In Arizona, it's been a little freer. They're starting to this week. They're starting to open up things like hair salons and barber shops, and then some a little bit later next week there'll be some restaurants, low density, that will start to open up. But I guess in terms of us for recovery, I don't want to diminish the human toll that this pandemic has had, but my sense is that recovery will be centered around the health of the economy, and we have over I'm not sure what the number was today. Was it 32 million people that ended up that's now on the unemployment rolls? So we could be looking at something like depression level unemployment. And for me, I believe the market fundamentals are still there, but like most, I'm picturing that it's going to be more of a U-shaped recovery instead of a V-shaped rebound. I think also overall the precious metals industry as a whole has been very fortunate, especially as compared to travel, tourism, restaurants, entertainment. No doubt some precious metal segments have been and will be affected more than others. Consumers are going to need jobs, and they're going to need much more confidence before going out and buying jewelry and cars. That being the case, the industry itself is very resilient, and I think that stems from just the sheer diversity in which all of these commodities sort of flow into, and the lack of substitutions. We are seeing some trade-offs already. The mix of materials that we process, understandably, jewelry is down, but many of our medical and industrial and certainly defense precious metal applications, we're seeing more of those types of materials flow in. In thinking about this, this meeting, I reflected a bit on how just this whole thing has struck me about how disproportionately COVID-19 has impacted businesses, and how just simply randomly, depending on what side of the essential business list you fell on, was a determining factor between success and crisis.
Yeah.
And for me, looking forward as a business leader, I think that anybody that is able to weather this should both be thankful and and as well has some responsibility to build back the economy. And for a successful recovery, we shouldn't just rely on government to solve this and sort it out.
Sure.
There's certainly a part of it, but I really believe that we as successful businesses need to take a strong look beyond ourselves and our shareholders and ask, what more can we do for our employees? What more can we do for our customers? And probably most importantly, what more can we do for our community as a whole? And I'm trying to figure out what those things are. I mean, I know a lot of people early on did things like, if they had a chance to convert over some of their operations to if they had distilling operations to make hand sanitizers. Peg Gannon, the owner of our business, has been making masks for all of our employees and their families, and great leadership by example thing there for sure. And but that's right now during the crisis. There's going to be a lot of things that are needed during recovery, and that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody else is too.
Along with the rest of us, absolutely, Chris. I think Larry Baden, I think you might have had a comment about what you anticipate in the return to work.
We have certainly started to draft plans and develop ideas. State of New Jersey yesterday announced that the current restrictions will stay in place through June 7th, I believe it is. So that's 4+ weeks away. As I mentioned earlier, we have over 100 people working from home. Johnson Matthey has said going forward, I won't say there's state or governmental policies, but these are Johnson Matthey policies. We're going to continue using masks, social distancing. So, bringing everybody back would be a challenge. So we're looking at developing rotations, spreading people out. Maybe some people just continue to work 100% working from home. Have posed that question to a variety of the managers, whether it's sales, finance, engineering, trying to develop what works for what department. I don't think there's going to be a one shop fits all, one solution fits all departments. We have implemented it came up earlier about temperature scanning. I think this is our 3rd week. We have an IR temp scan. You kind of stand between two sensors. It's a green light, red lights, just kind of a go, no-go gauge skin temperature sensor that we purchased. I think there was an 8-week backlog, and I understand a number of other Johnson Matthey sites have implemented it. But that temperature monitoring for all employees, visitors, contractors, at the entrance will remain. It's not going to, June 8th, we don't have to do it anymore. It's moving forward, being preventative. As I've said, we continue to hide from this virus. We're not curing it right now. So I think we've got to continue to protect the business, so it remains viable as an employer, viable as a source for our customers. So it's critical that we just don't jump back in and say, it's over. It's not a hurricane. The storm didn't go back out to sea. It's still around us. So it's going to take a lot more dialogue, a lot more planning for it. And again, I think we'll implement something and maybe it'll work, and maybe we've got to modify it. And again, I'm confident my workforce here and will be flexible enough and smart enough to adapt quickly.
Thank you, Larry. I think we're moving into the 60-minute mark here, gentlemen and viewers. Thank you for being with us for the hour. I wanted to try to squeeze one more question in before we wrap this up. There's been a question posted on the viewer comments about compliance issues. Has anyone seen or had to make any specific changes to their programs in response to the travel bans and so forth, causing maybe some different supply chain routes than are typical? And has that gotten in the way of responsible sourcing?
Not for us. No.
Haven't seen it, Chris? Okay.
No.
I don't know of any of this at Saban. We're exercising the same diligence that we had all along. I think
Yeah,
one thing that
has been no impact.
no impact, Larry?
There's been no impact from that either.
Thank you. One thing that we have seen is, the economy got this perfect storm, if you will, of so many effects at once, and the oil price dropping out. We're being asked as a precious metals industry to support our petroleum, petrochemical, and chemical clients who are being affected by their price drop. For a short while, you could get a roll of toilet paper cheaper than you could a barrel of oil. But now, of course, we're facing the opposite. We're in our industry, many of these virus mitigation programs and protocols that we've implemented have increased their costs internally to get the same job done, as well as we've commented earlier, the interest rates on platinum and palladium spiking up and everything else. So while we're trying to support each other, I think it really is a two-way street where everyone's trying to support each other in the best way that they can and keep facilities like ours able to operate and not under such stringent restrictions that it's going to cause yet another tumble for our industry. I just wanted to make one closing comment here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Larry Drummond. In 2016, I was privileged to hear General Colin Powell speak at the AFPM conference in San Antonio. And even though I realize his comments were distinctly from an American point of view, I think that the words of inspiration that I took notes listening to the general, I think that his words of inspiration really bear mention here. He was describing how between 1963 and 1974, it literally looked like the United States was falling apart. We'd seen the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the following assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. We'd had a vice president, Spiro Agnew, who had to step down in shame. And then we had a president, Richard Nixon, who had to step down in shame. But Powell's words were, whatever the challenges are, we will get through it. That the point, as he put it, is always that we do not lose faith in the resiliency of humanity. I hope that this webinar and the efforts of these gentlemen and everybody behind the scenes has somehow helped everyone who tuned in stay connected. Let's continue to support one another in the best way that we can and interact on these different platforms within the online community. And I'm going to turn it back over to Larry Drummond, the IPMI Executive Director. Thanks to everybody who made this possible, and thanks for including me. Best of luck, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you. I'd like to personally thank the team that made this production possible, and that's Becky Berube, Sandra Orantz, Brad Cook, and our partners at Kitco, John Durakis and Callan Colino. And last but not least, our wonderful panel. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
As I mentioned, this is our first global webinar. We are planning a second one for early June. The focus will be auto catalyst, where we will have a panel discussion on specific issues, which will span several segments of that market, from finance, producers, manufacturers, recycling, and refiners. So stay tuned for more information on that upcoming webinar. Also, there are many on this call that are not members of IPMI. Just for a brief minute, just a brief explanation, we are a global organization that have members from all segments of the precious metal industry. We have several specific topical committees. In fact, our Environmental Regulatory Affairs Committee is holding its spring meeting as a webinar next Thursday, May 14th. We have several regional chapters, so please check out the IPMI at our website, www.ipmi.org. One thing I can guarantee you if you become a new member of IPMI, you will connect to the industry players, you will learn from the industry players, and you will build relationships with the industry players. And I can tell you from my personal experience in my career, that has meant a great deal. We look forward to having all of you, members and non-members join future webinars, and God willing, hopefully see you in September at the Platinum Dinner in New York City and our annual conference in November in Las Vegas. Now, there was a question that came up about the annual conference during the call here. And as you know, all the hotels and casino-based hotels are currently shut down in Las Vegas. And Nevada, like other states, are in the process of implementing phased plans. So our conference is a little more than 6 months away. So it's going to depend on what phase they're in. But like I said, God willing, hopefully we'll be in a phase where that conference will go on. The hotel assures us that they, are taking this time to thoroughly do all the precautions necessary to open. They're ready to open on as soon as they're able to. So there'll be more communications from now until November on that. And I think we're all looking forward to the day where we all can be together and get back to having some face-to-face meetings and business and enjoying some good times together. I wish you, your families and colleagues, all the best in these trying times. I'm very confident we'll come out of this as an even stronger community. And please practice all the recommended precautions and be safe. Thank you all for joining today.
Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you. Be well.
Stay healthy.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Cheers.
Take care.